Do you want to learn more on how to put money to work in regenerative food and agriculture? Follow our video course via investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/course or in the links below. Now, on to the podcast. Welcome to another episode of Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, Investing as if the planet mattered. A podcast show where I talk to the pioneers in the regenerative food and agriculture space to learn more on how to put our money to work to regenerate soil, people, local communities and ecosystems while making an appropriate and fair return. Why my focus on soil and regeneration? Because so many of the pressing issues we face today have their roots in how we treat our land, grow our food and what we eat. And it's time that we as investors, big and small, and consumers start paying much more attention to the dirt/soil underneath our feet. Before we get started, I've been recording these interviews next to my day job, and I will definitely continue to do so and release about an episode a month. But at the same time, I would love to take this further, share more interviews. There are many more stories to share on investing in regenerative food and agriculture. More depth, improve the quality, maybe even doing some video series. So I started a Patreon community, which makes it easy to support creators like myself. If these podcasts have been of value to you, and if you have the means, I invite you to support me and make this happen. For more information, please find the link to my Patreon account in the description below. And now, without further ado, the interview. Enjoy! Welcome to Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, Agriculture as if the planet mattered. In these interviews, I'm talking to people who are scaling up the sector, either by increasing the influx of capital or by working on the ground to scale up the enterprises on the ground. Why regenerative agriculture? Because so many of the world current issues come together in this subject, from drought to water scarcity, climate change, social issues, hunger, obesity, all have a connection to how we grow food and what we eat. You're going to listen to an interview with Michiel Lenstra, partner at the Wire Group and impact investor, and we'll be talking about the role of smallholder farmers in the regenerative agriculture revolution. Enjoy. So very warm welcome. I'm Koen van Seijen, your host of today. Today in the podcast we have Michiel Lenstra, impact investor and partner at the Wire Group, a group who helps high net worth individuals and families in the Netherlands to move their capital to impact. And we have a slightly different angle today, looking mostly at the role of smallholder farmers in the agriculture transition that we are in. Welcome, Michiel.
Hello, Koen.
So to start off immediately with a personal question, why are you in this space and why are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah, to answer that, I think it's good to explain that I'm wearing two hats today. As you already said, as partner at the Wire Group and as impact investor. The work that I do with the Wire Group, where we will help families to do their impact investments. The reason for doing that is because I just see an enormous potential for redeploying capital in much more productive and much more impactful ways. When I was at KPMG, I already started seeing this potential, and then I decided to make that a full-time occupation. When I look at capital and the potential of deploying that in the real economy as opposed to the kind of more fictional economy of numbers and financial returns as numbers, then I think that's enormously valuable. So that's the work that I'm doing with Wire Group. The background to all this is when I was doing some work for Philips in Brazil, and I was sitting in my hotel in Brasilia and looking out the window. There were a group of homeless people sitting in the park that I could see from my room, and it was at that point that I kind of these different streams of thought came together. And the intention or the ambition to kind of help a significant number of people to improve their lives through private markets kind of came up, and the work with Wire Group is kind of a flows out of that. In addition, I'm also an impact investor myself, and the focus that I've chosen for that is agriculture. Again, this starts quite a few years back when I was doing at KPMG a number of projects in the agriculture space. We were doing calculations of the costs and benefits of making a transition of value chains, agricultural value chains, to more sustainable value chains. And that kind of brought me in touch with the whole smallholder theme that I became increasingly interested in. And I think, for me, this is really where kind of the environmental challenges that we face and the social challenges that we face come together in a very unique way.
Yeah. So why smallholder farmers? What's why was that part of the sector, of the agriculture sector, so interesting to you?
Yeah, like I said, the potential for impact there is to my mind just really incredible, because while at KPMG we were doing these calculations of, like I said, the costs and benefits of transitioning the sector, it was very clear in those calculations that with quite minor changes in how these farmers work, their agricultural practices, or their access to particular inputs, or what have you, that quite minor changes had such a huge impact on their income, for example, on their productivity and their income. So I really saw that potential, and the more I started looking into it, the more I realized that so many different themes that I care about, at least, come together there. If you consider that about 65% of the world poor are either farmers or the family of farmers, and you realize that 75% of the people that are hungry in this world are also living in rural areas, and therefore also directly or indirectly dependent on agriculture. And then you look at the environmental side of things, and you realize that, about, depending on the figures you look at, but nearly 30% of greenhouse gases come from agriculture. 80-90% of water is used in agriculture. The list goes on and on. So really, for me, agriculture is at the heart of the social and environmental challenges that we face today, and within that, the smallholder really represents both the challenges, because they face enormous challenges. If you look at the kind of life of an average smallholder farmer, it's really quite daunting to see what kind of reality they face. But also in terms of the potential. So again, some statistics suggesting that smallholder farmers as a group, and there's about 500 million of them, so there are an enormous number of them, but as a group they can increase their productivity by 50-60%, and obviously these are kind of quite broad stroke figures, but I think the message is clear that there's an enormous potential, which, looking at the potential for contributing to food security, for example, the question of how do we feed the billions of people on Earth by 2050, that is constantly raised. I think smallholders hold the key to answering that question.
Yeah, they really seem to be at the crossroad of many movements, and especially, with 500 million, the social angle is extremely important, and it's extremely sad that most poor people are farmers, and most undernourished people are also farmers, which of course should be completely different. So if you look at it from an angle from the social perspective and the smallholder farmers at regenerative agriculture, what do you think are a few logical steps that should happen if we look 5 or even 10 years? Agriculture is a long-term play, 15, 20 years from now. Where do you see movements, and where would you like to see movements going?
Well, I think again, it's a story of challenge and opportunity. The challenge is, as I see it, to unlock that potential that is there, for farmers to become much more productive in all senses of the word, which also translates then to a much more stable and much more a higher level of income, and thereby also contribute to the food security question. So to unlock that potential, while at the same time not repeating many of the mistakes that have been made in agriculture over the last decades, whereby the earth has just been taken as a receptacle for the crops that we want to grow. You have the soil, you put in some chemical inputs and a seed, and then you harvest the crop, and you repeat that year after year, not really paying any attention to the health of the soil. So if we unlock that potential of smallholder farmers, but go down that road that we have gone down before, then I think it's not the win-win opportunity that I think exists in the smallholder farmer space.
So it's really balancing, not making the same mistakes we have made, or in hindsight, when we made them, of course, they were very logical steps we took, but in hindsight we learned a lot of things, and hopefully we can prevent another big group of farmers from making the same mistakes.
Yeah, and I mean that's obviously difficult, because it is very hard to ask from somebody who is very poor and who has an opportunity to improve their situation, to say, okay, but we would like you to do it in such and such a way, so that you're not repeating the mistakes that we've made before, and that you save our earth. It's kind of a parallel to the climate change discussion, where we've put all these climate gases into the atmosphere, and now we're asking developing economies to say, okay, well, there's too much climate gas in the atmosphere. Can you stay in place? Yeah, so it's a similar discussion, but I think kind of paradigmatically, we need to change that discussion and realize. And I think many smallholder farmers realize that anyway, whether it's explicitly or implicitly, that the ecosystem services that are provided are essential to their success, and in some ways maybe even more so than it is for the larger scale farmers in more developed economies, because simply said, smallholder farmers just don't have the financial means to replace ecosystem services, whether it's organic material or nutrition for the crops, or whether it's pest management or water, etc. They just don't have the money to invest to replace those ecosystem services, which are provided in a healthy ecosystem. So I think if we look at it from that mindset, then the two actually go hand in hand.
Yeah, and they have to, because what gives us the right to tell somebody to not develop in a certain way? Actually, nothing probably gives us the right to do that. But if it fits into the most logical steps, and hopefully we can make it in such a way, and with local farmers, that the only way, or the only logical way forward, is the regenerative agriculture, or the sustainable agriculture, or ecological agriculture, or whatever stamp we put on it. But yeah, we can't ask anybody to make a sacrifice like that, especially if you're a smaller farmer that literally lives from one season to the next. And please don't put this fertilizer because it's bad from 5 years from now, which is incredibly arrogant thing to say.
No, absolutely, and again, the good news is that empirical studies have shown that it's not a zero-sum game in the sense that productivity growth and regeneration or kind of ecologically centered agriculture kind of are mutually exclusive. In fact, they're not. And studies have shown that you can have significant productivity increase through ecosystem-centric farming practices. So, I mean, I think that's definitely very encouraging, and I think the interesting challenge is how do we kind of put that into practice as we scale solutions for smallholder farming. How can we embed that kind of ecosystem-centric farming into the products and services that I think are the key to smallholder farmers reaching their potential? Because I mean, I think we can talk about that more in a minute, but I think that's where I see a real gap at the moment. For reaching that potential, the lack of appropriate products and services geared to smallholders.
Yeah, because you've been looking at this sector for quite a bit. You've been investing in it. You've been working on agriculture, also from the perspective of at the Wire Group. So what have you been seeing, the gap you just mentioned? Can you explain a bit more about that, and maybe one or two examples of companies or solutions that are trying to fill that gap?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to kind of realize and understand is that smallholder farmers are not farmers by choice most of the time. They're farmers by legacy, because their families, their forefathers were farmers, and that's what they were born into, and they're working the land, but it's really a hand-to-mouth existence. They're subsistence farmers. So I think that's an important point to start from. And if you start from that, then you can also start to kind of understand that many smallholder farmers don't want to be on the farm. They actually want to move to the urban areas and seek out different opportunities. On the other hand, there will be smallholder farmers who do want to be in farming, but then probably not under the conditions that they are doing it right now. And I think what stands between the conditions within which they're doing it right now, that subsistence, hand-to-mouth existence, it comes from a number of gaps in the marketplace, which means that smallholder farmers just have very limited access to the market, and that shows itself in different ways, whether it's access to the market for land, access to the market for knowledge and technology, whether it's access to the financial markets, or access to the actual product markets. Many farmers, smallholder farmers, don't have a good idea of what price they should be asking for their produce, and actually end up underselling, which is to the detriment of their income. So I think there's a lot of struggle to enter markets, and I think that gap can be filled by innovative approaches by companies that are providing products and services that make those linkages. And you asked about examples. So one of the companies that you and I have both invested in is Landmap. And Landmap is a Dutch company that works with farmers in initially Ghana, but they have plans to go to other countries. But initially Ghana, they're working with farmers to literally map out their land, because most land entitlement in Ghana and many other countries is based on customary practices. So there are understandings about who has what land, but it's not documented and it's not official, which makes these farmers very vulnerable, because if a government official or a chief comes along and says, hey, this land is mine, they don't really have any recourse, and it also makes it harder for them to invest in their land because of that risk, and also issues around kind of how do you pass land on from one generation to the next. So this company is using some not very pioneering technology, but using it in a pioneering way, namely to use GPS to map out the land, and then they have a whole process whereby they get turn that digital map of the land into an official title for the land, which then helps them get access to things like credit and maybe in time can also help stimulate a market for agricultural land, whereby those farmers that don't want to be farmers, they can sell or lease their land to those farmers that do want to be, and give those farmers that are wanting to be farming and wanting to be entrepreneurial in doing that, to expand the land that they manage, and work on a slightly bigger scale. Not to say that scale is everything, but at least it allows some more flexibility in how they operate.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent example of really to start at the bottom of the pyramid. In this case, cocoa farmers in Ghana that are among the poorest of the poorest, while we are paying a really hefty sum for our chocolate bars. So there's something in the value chain that has to change, and hopefully it starts with land ownership and land titles.
One of the other challenges, like I said, is access to knowledge and to technology, because most of the smallholder farming is very labor intensive, which on the one hand I think can be seen as a positive thing, in the sense that it supports local jobs, but in more and more rural economies, the reality is actually that there is an increasing shortage of labor, or that labor is becoming more and more expensive, particularly when you look at it on a seasonal basis, because a lot of people are moving off the land and into the cities, and also because of the aging of the population, of the rural population. This manual labor is actually becoming more scarce and more expensive, which leaves the farmers that are dependent on that with another challenge, namely how do I work the land and make that economically viable. So another company that I've looked at is Hello Tractor. They are setting up in Nigeria to provide tractor services. So they sell tractors which are GPS enabled. They sell them to small entrepreneurs who in turn rent out the tractor on a job by job basis, so that the farmers, the smallholder farmers, can get access to this technology, which on its own is not affordable for a single farmer to put up the capital for a tractor, even if it is a small, low horsepower tractor. But it gives them access to the services of the tractor, and thereby able to work their land much more efficiently and also to much lower cost. So those are just a couple of examples of companies that are coming up and entering this smallholder market.
Yeah, an extremely interesting example from another angle. And if you look at when we bring it to a bit more, this was already extremely practical, but if you look at your work in the past, let's say year, both your both hats, so both your own impact investing and also as partners the Wire Group, if you look a year ago and until now, what has changed in the sector, in your work? What has kept you busy, and what are you happy that you basically concluded maybe as we are approaching actually the end of the year?
So let me take the two strands then. From a Wire Group perspective, a huge amount has changed over the last year, simply because we have seen amongst our client base an interest to kind of start putting up more capital and moving more capital into the impact investing space, but at the same time not really knowing how to deploy that. And with Wire Group, that's the role that we are taking to kind of do the hand holding and provide the services around making the impact investments. So that's I think obviously the figures are there from the work that Gin and JP Morgan are doing yearly. So they're showing the yearly growth in impact investing. But for me personally, it's really great to see that kind of translated very concretely into our client base over the past year. So that's very exciting. And then from an investment point of view, I think, I just gave those two examples. I think that there are more examples. I think there has been a realization, and this is going back definitely more than a year, but in the past kind of 5 years or so, there's been a realization in lots of different levels of society, from the UN down to the international NGOs, but also I think within impact investing, there's been a realization that there is this promise of the smallholder farmers, and that is now translating into an increasing number of opportunities in that field, because we also have to be realistic and understand that this is also a very difficult market. I mean, the market of selling products and services to smallholders is possibly one of the most difficult markets to be in, because, as we've said, the smallholders are poor. They don't have a very high level of professionalization. They're not used to buying products and services. They're obviously incredibly geographically dispersed, often in very not very densely populated areas. So distribution is an issue. Their incomes, even when they do have an income, are extremely volatile, living from harvest to harvest. So I think we also have to be very realistic that this is a very difficult market to be in, and despite that, there are now an increasing number of initiatives and companies and also funds that are focusing on this. So I think personally, again, that is exciting and very positive.
Yeah, it seems like the space is waking up and offering more and more ways to. Still, it's very early on, but to put money to work in this sector, and that's a good thing, because without that, we cannot really move capital into the space. And when let's take it to a year from now, what will have changed in your work with both hats, and what would you like to have seen changing with your work in the next 12 months?
I think from a Wire Group point of view, what I would like to see in a year time is that the approach that we are taking with Wire Group, which is basically one around building impact investing portfolios, whereby we look both at kind of a finance first perspective, whereby we say, investing in impact doesn't necessarily have to mean that you're compromising on financial returns. That the realization is amongst our client base is growing, that is possible. But on the other hand, that there's also room for investing from a more theory of change kind of approach. So that people really dig into a particular theme that's important and close to them, and invest in that with a view to developing a particular theme or a particular sector, and building that up and building up the ecosystem that's necessary around that. So with Wire Group, we've just done a paper. We've written a paper on agriculture and food. So that's just one example of a theme that we've looked at, and I think and others will follow. And I think that that approach to impact investing is very necessary and very important, and that's also the approach that I take from my personal point of view. So it's about the individual investments, but it's also about the ecosystem that is building up, because you need, and that's obviously not for single investors always to realize that, or to make that happen. But as long as you're taking that perspective of building the ecosystem of companies, services, NGOs, etc., that are contributing to a particular theory of change. So so in short, what I would like to see in a year's time is that in Wire Group, we get our clients to awaken, but realize this dual approach of finance first, portfolio building, and also venturing into a particular theory of change. And then from the smallholder agriculture, I'm just looking forward to seeing more and more development in that space, and seeing that ecosystem of products and services building further and further.
And then I think if we look at more you use your personal hat as an impact investor, obviously. What do you see as the two most important barriers? We already discussed this in the at the beginning. What are, for you personally, the two most important barriers to make impact investments in regenerative agriculture with a more smallholder farmer angle?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to what I said earlier, which is I think the real barrier to making this work is to ensure that the productivity improvement and the development of smallholder farmers occurs in lockstep with an environmental perspective, which has a clear understanding and a clear appreciation of the ecosystem context within which that occurs. And on a very practical level, that means that companies like Hello Tractor, which are selling these tractor services to smallholder farmers, that they take that approach, and I think to some extent they do. So, for example, they are already have an attachment to the tractor with which they can do seed drilling, which in turn enables no-till or low-till agriculture, which from a soil perspective is obviously much better. So it is possible, but it is important and necessary that all those companies that are providing these products and services definitely have a very genuine and authentic commitment to that ecosystem-centric approach. So that's one barrier or challenge that I see. And on the other hand, I've just described kind of this energy that is being generated around smallholder farmers, and that translating into new initiatives, which I think is positive. But I think there's also a risk that because there's also a lot of interest among the UN and the NGOs, etc., in this sector. One of the concerns that I have is that at one point large amounts of institutional grant funding start going into this sector. I mean, or obviously already a lot of money is going into it, but if that is to scale up and all these organizations are working in isolation to come up with new projects, and they don't deploy that money in a way that's supportive of the kind of grassroots initiatives that are coming up, then I think there's a risk that those grassroots initiatives will suffer from that, because they will be because they won't have access to that money, and that money is going into the projects that have been selected by these organizations rather than supporting that sector development. So that's I think those are two kind of areas that are a challenge.
Yeah, we should try to somehow also get that grant money in an impact investing format, or to invest it at least with those glasses on, because otherwise it could really disrupt the sector, as we've seen actually in other sectors as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key to it is to take the smallholder perspective, which or maybe put another way, to empower the smallholder to make his or her own choices, and to spend their money on the products and services that they see as a best match for what they need, rather than design a project for developing smallholder farmers on paper and then kind of imposing that on the smallholder farmers. So maybe in some sense the best thing to do would be to just whatever grant money is available, to just give that to the smallholders, and then from there that will really kind of create a boost in demand for products and services specifically geared towards smallholders, and then you actually get a very powerful boost rather than working counterproductively.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and also a great point to finish this interview. And I would like to thank you for your time, and I think we'll be definitely checking in with you in less than a year from now to see and to hear hopefully many more examples of ways to invest into smallholder farmers with an ecological angle, and to make sure that for many generations to come, farmers are not the ones that are malnutritioned mostly and are the poorest of the poorest.
Absolutely. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this.
You just listened to an interview with Michiel Lenstra, partner at the Wire Group and impact investor. We talked about the role of smallholder farmers in the regenerative agriculture space, and I hope you will join us again soon with more of these interviews. If you found the Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food podcast valuable, there are a few simple ways you can use to support it. Number 1, rate and review the podcast on your podcast app. That's the best way for other listeners to find the podcast, and it only takes a few seconds. Number 2, share this podcast on social media or email it to your friends and colleagues. Number 3, if this podcast has been of value to you, and if you have the means, please join my Patreon community to help grow this platform and allow me to take it further. You can find all the details on patreon.com/regenerativeagriculture or in the description below. Thank you so much, and see you at the next podcast. Dear friends of the podcast, I'm super excited to share with you the online video course Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food. How to put money to work in regenerating soils at scale and growing a lot of tasty food while doing it. Why are we doing this course? After 100 interviews and more than 100 hours of audio asking the question how to put money to work in regenerating soils, and have been following the space since 2011 and recording these podcasts since 2016, we thought it was time to share our lessons learned. What have we seen in the space over the last years? How have we built our decision-making framework? What to focus on with the podcast? How have we picked interviewees? And what questions should you ask? What is happening in the space? What should you read? What should you listen? What should you watch? how to approach this space. For whom is this course? You, the soil builders and investors in this space. The soil builders, people working in this space, entrepreneurial farmers, fund managers, vehicle builders, crowd investing, platform builders, agtech companies, farm-to-gut food companies, permaculture, keyline designers, holistic management consultants, etc., etc. People that are building soil at scale. And the investors who are putting their own money to work through their family office or as private individuals, or people who are putting other people's money to work through foundations, institutional capital, banks, insurance companies, etc. Is this course free? No. This is pay what you think it's worth. Meaning, I have no way of knowing what this course will be worth to you. And I'm very aware that among the listeners of this podcast, we have people with very different means. So I'm inviting you, if this course is creating value to you, and if you have the means, to consider paying what you think it's worth. Thank you. So what is this course? It's currently a series of 17 videos, mostly ranging from 10 to 15 minutes, plus PDF slides, so you don't have to ride along. We're going to look into why invest in regenerative agriculture and why extractive agriculture is so risky, how to invest, what kind of frameworks you could and I think should build, what to invest in, what kind of co-investors you could find, or what kind of investors you could find if you're a soil builder. Every lesson will have a digging deeper part where I will share what kind of reports, what kind of interviews, what kind of videos you can look into if you want to dig deeper. We're going to look at nutrient density, landscape design, and a lot more. So what is it not? It's not a list of investable deals. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist in this world. We're really at the beginning of the regenerative agriculture and food revolution. It's also not investment advice. Before making any investment, please find professional investment advice. So get ready, get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or whatever you're drinking. Click on the link below, sign up, and I'm really looking forward to your feedback.